I stood outside our cramped New York apartment building, my hands trembling as I watched the car that had been mine, my freedom, handed over like a gift to her, my husband's mother. The keys slipped from my husband's hand with such cold indifference it was as if I was invisible. My heart shattered in the bitter autumn air, and I didn't fight. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and for 67 years, I thought I understood what love meant. I thought sacrifice was the same as devotion. I thought giving everything I had, my money, my time, my very soul, would earn me the respect I desperately craved from the people who were supposed to love me most. I was wrong about so many things, but I was right about one thing. I deserved better. Every morning for the past 15 years, my routine had become a blurred cycle of early shifts at Murphy's Diner on 8th Avenue and long nights alone in our dimly lit apartment in Queens. The smell of burnt coffee and grease clung to my uniform like a second skin, mixing with the stale scent of forgotten dreams that seemed to seep from the very walls of our cramped home. I would drag myself up 4 flights of stairs, my knees aching from hours on my feet, only to find Richard sprawled on the couch, remote in hand, barely acknowledging my existence. That cherry-red Honda Civic sitting in our building's parking lot had been my one escape. I bought it with my own money I earned serving endless cups of coffee to strangers who at least said thank you when I refilled their mugs. It wasn't much, but it was mine. When I slipped behind that steering wheel, I could pretend I was someone else, someone who mattered. The car represented everything I had sacrificed for. Every double shift I pulled when Richard's construction work dried up, every birthday where I pretended his mother's cold stare didn't cut through me like broken glass. Every holiday where I cooked for 20 people and cleaned up alone while they watched football in the living room, their laughter echoing through the walls like mockery. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of gray day that makes New York feel particularly unforgiving. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when I heard Richard on the phone with his mother, Dolores. Her voice carried through the thin walls like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Of course, Ma. Whatever you need. Margaret won't mind." Those words stopped me cold. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. "The car? Yeah, she barely uses it anyway. You need it more than she does." I felt something die inside me in that moment. Not dramatically, not with tears or screaming. It died quietly, like a candle flame snuffed out by an indifferent wind. My hands went numb, and the shirt I was folding dropped to the floor. For 38 years of marriage, I had been Richard's wife. For 23 years before that, I had been someone's daughter, someone's caretaker, someone's solution to every problem that money or exhaustion could solve. But in that moment, standing in my own bedroom, listening to my husband give away the one thing that belonged to just me, I realized I had never been anyone at all. The next morning, Richard handed me a cup of coffee like it was any other day. His hands were rough from years of manual labor, stained with the kind of honest work that I had always respected about him. But those same hands had signed over my car keys without a second thought. "Ma's coming to pick up the Honda this afternoon," he said, not even looking up from his newspaper. The sports section. Always the sports section. Her old Buick finally died. She needs something reliable. I stared at the steam rising from my coffee cup, watching it dissipate into nothing. "That's my car, Richard." He looked up then, his gray eyes flat and annoyed. "Come on, Maggie. Don't be like that. It's just sitting there most of the time anyway. Ma can put it to good use." "I use it to get to work. I use it to go to the grocery store. I use it to— You can take the bus." His tone was final, dismissive, the same tone he used when telling me we couldn't afford a vacation or new clothes or anything that might make me happy. Ma's family. Family comes first. Family comes first. Those words had been the soundtrack to my entire adult life. They justified every sacrifice, every swallowed protest, every moment when my own needs were pushed aside for the greater good of keeping peace with Dolores and her endless demands. I want you to understand something about Dolores. She wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law. She was an architect of manipulation, a master craftsman of guilt and control. At 79, she had perfected the art of getting what she wanted while making you feel selfish for even thinking about saying no. When Richard and I were first married, I tried so hard to win her approval. I cooked her favorite meals, remembered her birthday, sent flowers on Mother's Day. But nothing was ever enough. My lasagna was too watery. My flowers were the wrong color. My very presence in her son's life was an inconvenience she endured with theatrical sighs and pointed comments. "Richard used to be so independent before he met you," she would say with a sweet smile that never reached her eyes. "Now he needs permission for everything." Over the years, I learned to swallow my responses. I learned to bite my tongue when she criticized my cooking, my clothes, my job, my very existence. I learned to nod and smile when she told elaborate stories about how much better Richard's life had been before me. I learned to disappear into myself until I was barely there at all. But the car was supposed to be different. The car was mine. That afternoon, I watched from our fourth-floor window as Dolores examined the Honda like she was buying it from a dealer. She ran her fingers along the hood, checked the tires, peered through the windows with the critical eye of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. Richard stood beside her like an eager puppy, hands in his pockets, rocking back and forth on his heels. When she nodded her approval, he actually smiled. I couldn't remember the last time he had smiled at me like that. 20 minutes later, my car was gone. 20 minutes, and 36 months of car payments, insurance, registration fees, and repairs meant nothing. Dolores drove away in my cherry-red Freedom, and Richard waved goodbye like he had just solved all the world's problems. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Richard snored beside me. The streetlight outside cast shadows that danced across the water-stained plaster, and I found myself thinking about a life I hadn't remembered in years. His name was David Chen, and 30 years ago, he had loved me in a way that made me feel beautiful. We met in college, both of us studying literature, both of us dreaming of lives bigger than our circumstances seemed to allow. He wrote me poetry on napkins during our breaks at the campus coffee shop. He told me I had eyes that could hold entire conversations without saying a word. But David was patient and kind and steady, and somehow that felt too easy. When Richard came along with his rough hands and his confident swagger and his promises of adventure, I chose the fire over the warmth. I chose the man who made me feel like I had to earn his love instead of the one who gave it freely. David moved to Seattle after graduation. We lost touch the way people did before social media made everything permanent. Sometimes, in quiet moments over the years, I wondered what had become of him. I wondered if he remembered the girl I used to be, the one who laughed easily and dreamed big, and believed she deserved to be cherished. The girl who would never have let anyone take her car. 3 days after Dolores drove away in my Honda, I was walking to the bus stop in the cold October rain when my phone buzzed. A text message from our daughter, Sarah. "Mom, can you help with Emma's school fees? We're short this month." Emma was our granddaughter, Sarah's 15-year-old who barely acknowledged my existence when I visited. Sarah was our eldest, 34 years old, and permanently convinced that the world owed her something it hadn't delivered. Her husband Josh worked sporadically as a freelance graphic designer, which meant they were always between projects and always needing help. I had already given them $800 that month. My diner wages barely covered my own expenses, but somehow, I always found a way to help when they called. Because family comes first. Standing at that bus stop, water seeping through the holes in my shoes, I typed back. How much do you need? Just 500. We'll pay you back next month, promise. Next month. They had been paying me back next month for 7 years. I calculated quickly in my head. $500 would mean eating nothing but ramen noodles for the next 2 weeks and skipping my blood pressure medication again. But Emma needed school fees. Family comes first. Okay, I'll transfer it tonight. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Love you. Love you. 3 words that appeared at the end of text messages asking for money but never on birthdays, never on holidays, never just because. That evening I transferred the money online, watching my bank balance drop to a number that made my chest tight with anxiety. $47.33 until my next paycheck. In New York City, that amount wouldn't even cover groceries for 3 days. I was making myself a dinner of peanut butter on stale bread when Richard came home from his poker game at Tony's bar. He was in a good mood, which meant he had won more than he lost. Hey, Maggie. Ma called. She loves the car. Says it drives like a dream. I kept spreading peanut butter, my hands steady despite the fury building in my chest. I'm glad she's happy. See? I knew you'd come around. You're good people, Maggie. Ma always said so. That was a lie, and we both knew it. Dolores had never said anything kind about me in 38 years, but Richard lived in a fantasy where his mother's cruelty was just her way, and my pain was just sensitivity. He opened the refrigerator, frowned at its emptiness, then looked at me expectantly. What's for dinner? Whatever you want to make, I said quietly. He laughed like I had made a joke. Good one. Seriously, though, I'm starving. That poker game went long. I set down my bread and looked at him, really looked at him. When had the man I married become this stranger who saw me as a combination maid, bank, and personal chef? When had I become so invisible that he could give away my car and expect me to thank him for it? Richard, I'm tired. Tired? It's only 8 o'clock. No, I mean I'm tired of all of this. Something in my voice must have finally registered because he closed the refrigerator and actually looked at me. What's wrong now? You gave away my car. We've been through this. Ma needed it more. You didn't ask me. I shouldn't have to ask you. She's my mother. I'm your wife. He sighed the long, patient sigh of a man dealing with an unreasonable woman. Maggie, you're being dramatic. It's just a car. Just a car. Just my independence. Just my ability to get to work, to buy groceries, to exist in the world without depending on the mercy of public transportation and other people's schedules. Just the one thing I owned that was completely mine. I worked for that car, Richard. I made every payment. I paid for the insurance, the registration, the repairs. It was mine. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. That's how marriage works. Is it? Because I don't remember you consulting me when you bought that fishing boat last year. I don't remember you asking my opinion when you lent $3,000 to your brother Joey for his business opportunity that we never saw again. Richard's face darkened. That's different. How is it different? Because Joey's family, and the boat is something I enjoy. Ma needed transportation. You're being selfish. Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. After decades of sacrifice, after giving everything I had to everyone else, I was selfish for wanting to keep one small piece of my own life intact. I finished my peanut butter sandwich in silence while Richard rummaged through the freezer, eventually settling on a frozen pizza that cost more than I had budgeted for food for the entire week. He heated it up, ate it while watching television, and left the dirty plate on the coffee table for me to clean up later. That night, lying in bed beside him, I made a decision that terrified me more than anything I had ever contemplated. I was going to find David Chen. It took me 3 days of searching on Facebook during my breaks at the diner, but I found him. Dr. David Chen, professor of literature at the University of Washington. His profile picture showed a man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, silver threading through his black hair in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. He was married, had been for 25 years according to his photos. His wife was a small, elegant woman who smiled like she meant it. They had 2 daughters who looked happy and confident and loved. In every photo, his arm was around someone, holding them close, protective and proud. For a moment, I felt foolish. What was I thinking? That I could reach out to a man I hadn't spoken to in 3 decades and somehow recapture something that probably never existed the way I remembered it. But then I saw a post he had shared from a literary journal. A poem about second chances and the roads not taken, and the courage it requires to change course when you realize you've been walking in the wrong direction. My hands shook as I typed a simple message. Hi, David. This is Margaret Sullivan, Margaret Walsh from college. I hope you're well. I've been thinking about old friends lately and wondered how life has treated you. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before hitting send. Then I closed Facebook, finished my shift, and tried to pretend I hadn't just done something that felt like stepping off a cliff. He responded the next day. Margaret, what a wonderful surprise. I think about our college days more often than I probably should. Life has been kind to me, though not always easy. I'd love to hear about your journey. Are you still in New York? We began exchanging messages. Not daily, not intensely, just the gentle correspondence between 2 people rediscovering a friendship that time had buried. He told me about his career, his daughters, his love of teaching. He asked about my life with genuine interest, the kind of attention I couldn't remember receiving from anyone in years. I found myself looking forward to his messages in a way that felt dangerous and wonderful. When he wrote about a book he was reading or a trip he had taken with his family, I felt connected to something larger than my small gray existence. When he asked about my day, my dreams, my thoughts, I remembered that I was someone worth asking about. 3 weeks into our correspondence, he wrote something that made me cry in the bathroom at Murphy's Diner. I remember thinking you had the most beautiful laugh. It started in your eyes before it reached your voice. I hope you still laugh like that. I hadn't laughed, really laughed, in so long that I couldn't remember what it felt like. That same week, Sarah called with another request. Mom, I know I just asked for help with Emma's school, but our car broke down and we need $800 for repairs. Josh has a big project coming up, so we'll definitely be able to pay you back this time. I was standing in line at the grocery store, calculating whether I could afford both milk and bread that week. Sarah, I don't have $800. Come on, Mom. I know you have savings. She was right. I did have savings. $11,000 that I had scraped together over 15 years, hiding $20 here and $50 there from my diner wages. It was my emergency fund, my security blanket, my ticket to freedom if I ever found the courage to use it. That money isn't for what? Your family? Mom, we're desperate here. Emma needs to get to school. I need to get to work. We're not asking for charity, just a loan. But it was charity, and we both knew it. Just like the $500 from the previous month that they hadn't mentioned paying back. Just like the $3,000 I had given them over the summer for unexpected expenses. Just like the countless smaller amounts that disappeared into their lives without a trace. I'll transfer $500 tonight, I said finally. But that's all I can do right now. $500 won't cover the repairs, Mom. The mechanic said, $500 is what I have, Sarah. There was a pause. The kind of cold silence that felt like disappointment crystallizing on the other end of the line. Fine, I guess we'll figure out the rest ourselves. Thanks for whatever you can manage. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the grocery store aisle with a basket containing 1 carton of milk and a loaf of bread, feeling like I had failed some test I didn't know I was taking. That night, I transferred the $500 and watched my emergency fund shrink again. David had sent me a message earlier about a beautiful sunset he had seen while walking near his home in Seattle, and I found myself wishing I could see it too. When had I last paid attention to a sunset? When had I last done anything purely because it brought me joy? I was beginning to understand that joy was not something my family associated with me. I was Margaret the ATM, Margaret the maid, Margaret the placeholder who kept everyone else's lives functioning while disappearing more completely each day. But David remembered a girl who laughed with her whole body, who dreamed about traveling to every continent, who believed literature could save the world. In his messages, I caught glimpses of who I used to be, and it was startling to realize how much of myself I had lost. 2 months after Dolores drove away in my car, I found myself at the bus stop in the rain again, waiting for the crosstown express that would take me to my job pouring coffee for strangers. My phone buzzed with another request, this time from our son Michael. "Hey, Mom, can you watch the kids this weekend? Lisa and I need a break. We'll drop them off Friday night." Michael and Lisa lived in a beautiful house in Westchester that they had bought with help from Richard's inheritance when his father died. They drove matching SUVs and took vacation to places I couldn't afford to visit in my dreams. But somehow they always needed babysitting services when they wanted time alone. I loved my grandchildren, but at 67, chasing after a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old for entire weekends left me exhausted for days. My back couldn't take sleeping on the couch anymore, and I couldn't afford to take time off work to recover. "I can't this weekend, Michael. I have to work." "Can't you call in sick? We really need this, Mom. Lisa's been stressed with her new job and I'm pulling 60-hour weeks. We need some couple time." Couple time. When had Richard and I last spent time together that didn't involve him asking me to do something, pay for something, or solve something? "I'm sorry, but I can't afford to miss work. Maybe next weekend?" "Forget it. We'll figure something else out." Another deadline, another relationship casualty of my newfound inability to say yes to every request. That evening, Richard came home from his job site covered in dust and immediately headed for the shower. When he emerged, he found me sitting at our tiny kitchen table, staring out the window at the brick wall of the building next door. "What's wrong with you lately?" he asked, opening a beer from the refrigerator. "Michael said you wouldn't watch the kids this weekend. Sarah said you've been weird about money. Everyone's talking about how you're acting strange." Everyone. My entire family had been discussing my behavior like I was a problem to be solved. The fact that they were talking about me without talking to me told me everything I needed to know about my place in their lives. "I'm tired, Richard." "You keep saying that. Maybe you should see a doctor." Maybe I should. I did see a doctor the following week. Dr. Rodriguez at the clinic on Northern Boulevard had been treating me for high blood pressure for 3 years. She was a young woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of direct bedside manner that made you feel heard. "Your blood pressure is worse," she said, checking her chart. "Are you taking your medication?" "When I can afford it." She looked up sharply. "Margaret, this isn't optional. You're at risk for stroke, heart attack. This is serious." "I know it's serious, but sometimes I have to choose between medication and food. Sometimes I have to choose between medication and helping my family." "Your family should want you to take care of your health." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My family wants me to take care of them. My health is my responsibility." Dr. Rodriguez set down her pen and looked at me with concern. "Margaret, what's going on at home? You seem different. Sadder." No one had asked me that question in decades. When was the last time someone had noticed I was sad? When was the last time someone had cared enough to ask? I told her about the car, about the constant requests for money, about feeling invisible in my own life. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, never interrupting. "How long has it been since you did something just for yourself?" she asked when I finished. I thought about it. "I don't remember." "That's not healthy, Margaret. You matter too. Your needs matter. Your happiness matters." Walking home from the clinic, I called David. We had progressed to occasional phone calls, and hearing his voice always felt like stepping into sunlight. Margaret, you sound upset. What's wrong? I told him about the doctor's visit, about my family's endless demands, about feeling like I was disappearing one piece at a time. He listened the way he had listened in college, with complete attention, making small sounds of understanding and support. Do you remember, he said finally, that poetry class we took senior year? Professor Williams made us write about what we would regret most if we died tomorrow. I remember. You wrote about not seeing the Northern Lights, about not traveling to Ireland where your grandmother was born, about not writing the novel you carried in your head. I had forgotten those dreams so completely it was like hearing about another person's life. What did you write? I asked. I wrote about not telling you I loved you. The words hung in the air between us for a long moment. I sat down hard on a bench outside the clinic, my legs suddenly unsteady. David, I'm not trying to complicate your life, Margaret. I know you're married. I'm married too, and I love my wife. But I want you to know that 30 years ago, you mattered to someone. You mattered to me. And from what you're telling me, I don't think anyone in your life is reminding you of that. That night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, deep lines around her eyes, shoulders curved from years of carrying invisible weight. When had I become this person? When had I stopped mattering to myself? I made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I was going to start saying no. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Richard announced that his mother needed help cleaning out her garage, and he had volunteered my services for the entire weekend. I can't, I said simply. What do you mean you can't? I mean, I can't do it. I have other plans. What plans? I didn't actually have plans, but that wasn't the point. My plans. Richard stared at me like I had started speaking a foreign language. Ma's expecting you. This is important to her. Then you can help her clean the garage. I have to work on Saturday. You know that. Then she can hire someone. Hire someone? Maggie, what's gotten into you? Ma's family. We help family. We help family when it's convenient for you. I help family all the time, whether it's convenient for me or not. This time, I can't. He was angry now, his face reddening the way it did when he felt challenged. You're being ridiculous. It's one weekend. It's every weekend. It's every phone call, every request, every emergency that somehow becomes my responsibility to solve. That's what family does, Maggie. That's what love looks like. No, Richard. That's what exploitation looks like. The word hung between us like a slap. I had never used it before, never even thought it out loud. But once it was spoken, I couldn't take it back. Exploitation? Are you serious? Everything I do is for this family. I work my ass off. I provide for you. You work for yourself, Richard. You provide for yourself. And then you give away my car because your mother thinks she deserves it more than I do. Jesus Christ, we're back to the car again. We never left the car, Richard. The car is everything. The car is me not mattering. The car is you making decisions about my life without including me. The car is 38 years of marriage where I'm supposed to be grateful for the scraps of consideration you throw my way. He was looking at me like he had never seen me before, and I realized that was probably true. He had never seen me stand up for myself. He had never seen me refuse to bend. He had never seen me claim space for my own needs. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, he said finally. But I don't like it. I don't care if you like it. That night, Richard slept on the couch. In the morning, he left for work without speaking to me. I made my own coffee and sat at the kitchen table, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades: pride. I called Dolores myself and told her I wouldn't be coming to clean her garage. Her response was predictably dramatic. Margaret, I'm an old woman. I can't do this kind of work myself. Then hire someone to help you. Or ask one of your other sons. My other sons have families to care for. They're busy. I have a family too. I'm busy too. You work at a diner. The contempt in her voice was breathtaking. How busy can you be? Busy enough that I can't spend my weekends working for free in your garage. There was a long pause, the kind that usually preceded her most devastating attacks. I braced myself. I don't know what Richard sees in you, she said finally. You've always been selfish, but this is a new low. After everything this family has done for you. What has this family done for me, Dolores? The question seemed to catch her off guard. What? You said after everything this family has done for me. What exactly has this family done for me? Richard married you. We welcomed you into our family. Richard married me because he loved me, or said he did. That wasn't a favor you did for me. And you didn't welcome me into anything. You tolerated me because you had to. How dare you speak to me like this? How dare you speak to me like I'm nothing? How dare you take my car and act like I should be grateful? How dare you treat me like an employee in my own life? I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. It was power. It was the rush of finally standing up for myself. Within an hour, my phone was exploding with angry messages from Richard, Sarah, and Michael. I was being unreasonable. I was being cruel to an old woman. I was destroying the family. I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was having a breakdown. Maybe after 67 years of being everyone else's solution, I was finally breaking down into someone who mattered to herself. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself. Not groceries, not things the family needed, but something purely for my own pleasure. I found myself in a small bookstore in Forest Hills, surrounded by poetry collections and novels I had dreamed of reading when I was young. I bought 3 books with money that should have gone to utilities, and I didn't care. That evening, I made dinner for one. Richard didn't come home until after 10, and when he did, he went straight to bed without speaking to me. I sat in the living room reading until midnight, luxuriating in the silence, in the complete absence of anyone asking me for anything. David called the next day, sensing somehow that something had shifted. You sound different, he said. Stronger. I stood up to my mother-in-law yesterday, and to Richard, and to myself, I think. How does it feel? Terrifying and wonderful. Good. You deserve to feel wonderful, Margaret. You deserve to matter. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had stayed in touch after college? There was a long pause. Every day for the first 5 years. Then every week for the next 5. Then just regularly. Do you? More and more lately. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice careful. My wife and we've been having problems. Have been for years, actually. We're seeing a counselor, trying to work things out, but it's hard when you realize you've been more like roommates than partners for most of your marriage. I understood exactly what he meant. When had Richard and I last had a conversation about anything other than logistics? When had we last shared a dream, a fear, a hope? I'm sorry you're going through that. I'm not telling you to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because talking to you these past few months has reminded me what it feels like to connect with someone, to be seen by another person, and I want you to know that you're not alone in feeling invisible. After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness. Somewhere out there, in Seattle, a man I had loved 30 years ago was looking at his own city lights and thinking about me. The thought was both comforting and heartbreaking. The standoff with my family continued for 2 weeks. No one called to ask how I was doing. No one stopped by to check on me. But the requests for money stopped too, which told me everything I needed to know about their affection. During those 2 weeks, I did things I hadn't done in decades. I took long walks through Central Park on my days off. I visited the Metropolitan Museum and spent hours looking at paintings that made me feel something other than exhausted. I called old friends I had lost touch with when marriage consumed my identity. One of those friends was Elena Rodriguez, not the doctor, but a woman I had worked with at my first job after college. We hadn't spoken in 15 years, but she remembered me immediately. Margaret. Oh my God, I was just thinking about you last month. How are you? We talked for 2 hours, catching up on our lives. She was divorced, living alone, working as a freelance translator. She sounded happy in a way that made me envious. I remember thinking you were wasted on that husband of yours, she said toward the end of our conversation. You were so bright, so full of ideas. Then you got married, and it was like you dimmed yourself to make room for everyone else. You really thought that? Honey, everyone thought that, but you seemed happy, so we figured it was your choice. Happy. Had I been happy? Or had I just been so busy trying to make everyone else happy that I forgot to ask myself the question? Elena, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret getting divorced? Every day for the first year. But then I woke up one morning and realized I could have coffee in bed without anyone complaining that I was lazy. I could spend money on books without justifying the expense. I could make plans without consulting anyone. And I thought, this is what peace feels like. That night, I called David again. I think I'm falling in love with you again, I said without preamble. Margaret, I know it's complicated. I know we're both married, both trying to figure out what the rest of our lives look like. But I need you to know that talking to you has saved me. You've reminded me that I'm someone worth loving. You are worth loving. You've always been worth loving. Will you come to New York? The question surprised us both. I hadn't planned to ask it, hadn't consciously decided I was ready for that step. But the words were out there, hanging between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we were ready to cross. When? Soon. I need to see you. I need to remember what it feels like to be looked at like I matter. Margaret, if I come to New York, I know. It changes everything. Are you ready for everything to change? I thought about my empty bank account, my absent family, my husband who slept on the couch rather than apologize for treating me like I didn't exist. I thought about the woman in the bookstore who had looked at me with recognition when I bought poetry books, who had said, "It's never too late to start reading again." I thought about the sunset David had described in Seattle, the one I wanted to see with my own eyes. Yes, I said, I'm ready. He flew in on a Thursday in December, 3 days before Christmas. I met him at JFK Airport, wearing a dress I had bought with money I definitely couldn't afford, feeling more nervous than I had since I was 22 years old. I spotted him coming up the escalator from baggage claim, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. He looked like the man from his Facebook photos, but softer somehow, more real. When he saw me, his face lit up with the kind of smile I remembered from college, the one that made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. Margaret. He said my name like it was music. Hi, David. We stood there for a moment, two middle-aged people carrying decades of history and regret and hope. Then he stepped forward and hugged me, and I remembered what it felt like to be held by someone who was happy to hold me. You look beautiful, he said, and I believed him. We went to a small cafe in Greenwich Village, the kind of place we used to spend hours in when we were young and everything seemed possible. He ordered coffee, I ordered tea, and we talked like no time had passed at all. Tell me about your daughters, I said. His face transformed when he talked about them. Jessica was 23, a recent graduate student studying environmental science. Amy was 20, an art major with a rebellious streak and a heart bigger than her body. He spoke about them with the kind of pride and understanding that made me ache for what I had missed with my own children. They sound wonderful. They are. They're the best thing I ever did. He paused. Tell me about yours. I tried to summon the same parental pride, but the words came out flat. Sarah's 34. Works in marketing. Michael's 31. He's in finance. They're both married, both have children. Are you close? The question hit me harder than I expected. Were we close? Or were we just entangled in a web of obligation and resentment that we called family? I thought we were, but lately, I don't think they see me as a person. I think they see me as a resource. I'm sorry. So am I. We walked through the city for hours, talking about books and dreams and the paths our lives had taken. He told me about his marriage, how love had gradually transformed into companionship, then into habit, then into a kind of polite coexistence. I told him about Richard, about feeling erased by degrees until I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Do you remember? He said as we stood on the Brooklyn Bridge watching the sun set over Manhattan. That night senior year when we stayed up until dawn talking about what we wanted our lives to look like? You said you wanted to teach literature to young people who still believed books could save the world. And you said you wanted to travel everywhere and write about what you saw. I never wrote anything. I never went anywhere. It's not too late. I'm 67 years old, David. I work at a diner. I have $47 in my checking account. It's too late for everything. He turned to face me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Margaret, it's only too late when you're dead. Everything else is just circumstances. That night, we went back to my apartment. Richard was at his mother's house, probably complaining about my recent behavior and planning strategies to bring me back in line. I made dinner for two with ingredients I splurged on that afternoon: real vegetables, decent wine, the kind of meal I never bothered with anymore when it was just me. David looked around our cramped apartment with kind eyes, not judging but understanding. This is where you've been all these years. This is where I've been disappearing all these years. After dinner, we sat on the couch, the same couch where Richard fell asleep every night watching sports highlights. And David read me poetry from one of the books I had bought. His voice was the same as it had been in college, warm and careful, making every word sound important. Listen to this, he said, flipping through pages. It's Mary Oliver. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I started crying then. Not the quiet, defeated tears I had been shedding for months, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere I had locked away decades ago. I don't know, I whispered. I don't know what I plan to do with my one wild and precious life because I gave it away so long ago I can't remember what it looked like when it was mine. He held me while I cried, his hand stroking my hair, his voice murmuring the kind of comfort I had forgotten existed. It's not gone, Margaret. It's just buried. We can dig it up. When I finally stopped crying, he was looking at me with such tenderness I almost started again. I have to tell you something, he said. I'm leaving my wife. The words hung in the air between us. David, you can't make that kind of decision because of me. We've only been back in touch for a few months. I'm not leaving her because of you. I'm leaving her because I've been dead for 10 years, and talking to you reminded me what it feels like to be alive. You didn't cause my marriage to end, Margaret. You just showed me it was already over. What does that mean for us? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I want to find out, and I want you to find out with me. He stayed until Sunday. 3 days that felt like stepping into an alternate version of my life. We went to museums and walked through neighborhoods I had lived near for decades but never explored. We talked about books and politics and dreams we had abandoned. We made love on Saturday night, awkward and beautiful and desperate, two people trying to remember who they used to be. When I drove him to the airport in a rented car, spending money I definitely didn't have but needed more than food, I felt like I was watching my real life disappear into the distance. What happens now? I asked. Now you decide what you want your life to look like. I don't know how to do that. I've never made a decision just for myself. Then start small. What's one thing you want that has nothing to do with anyone else? I thought about it. I want to see the Northern Lights. Then go see the Northern Lights. David, I can't just... You can. You absolutely can. The woman I fell in love with in college would have figured out a way to see the Northern Lights. She's still in there, Margaret. I spent 3 days with her. Richard was waiting for me when I got back to the apartment, sitting at the kitchen table with the kind of expression that meant I was in serious trouble. Where have you been all weekend? Out. Out where? With who? With a friend. What friend? You don't have any friends. The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. He was right, of course. I had systematically alienated or neglected every friendship I'd ever had in service of being the perfect wife, mother, daughter-in-law. But the fact that he could say it so casually, like it was just an observable fact rather than a tragedy, told me everything I needed to know about how he saw my life. I had a friend this weekend. A friend? His voice was getting dangerously quiet. Margaret, if you're cheating on me, would it matter if I was? The question seemed to genuinely surprise him. Of course it would matter. You're my wife. When's the last time you acted like I was your wife, Richard? When's the last time you treated me like someone you actually wanted to be married to? I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this attitude needs to stop. Ma's been calling all weekend, upset about how you talk to her. The kids are worried about you. Everyone thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I am having a breakdown. Maybe I'm breaking down into someone who matters. You matter to me. No, Richard, I matter to your mother. I matter for doing her errands and cleaning her house and listening to her complain about everything I do wrong. I matter to Sarah and Michael for paying their bills and babysitting their children and solving their problems. I matter to you for cooking your meals and washing your clothes and being grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. But I don't matter to any of you as a person. That's not true. When's my birthday, Richard? He stared at me, and I watched the panic flicker across his face as he realized he didn't know. It's in September. October 15th. I've been your wife for 38 years, and you don't know when my birthday is. Birthdays aren't important to me. You know that. They're important to me. My health is important to me. My car was important to me. My feelings are important to me. But none of those things are important to you. Maggie, you're being unreasonable. Marriage is about compromise. No, Richard. Marriage is supposed to be about partnership. What we have is me compromising everything while you sacrifice nothing. I sacrifice plenty. I work every day to support this family. You work every day to support yourself. The money you make pays your bills, buys your beer, funds your poker games. I work to support everyone else. Jesus Christ, what do you want from me? The question was asked with such exasperation, such genuine confusion, that I almost felt sorry for him. After nearly 4 decades together, he truly didn't understand what I wanted from him. I want you to see me. I want you to know my birthday. I want you to ask my opinion before you give away my car. I want you to care more about my blood pressure than your mother's convenience. I want to matter to my own husband. You do matter to me. Then prove it. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him cycling through options, trying to find the right combination of words that would make me go back to being the woman who said yes to everything and asked for nothing in return. I'll talk to Ma about the car, he said finally. It's too late for that. What do you mean? I mean it's too late for small gestures and meaningless promises. You gave away my car without asking me because in your mind I don't deserve to be asked. That car is gone, and the woman who would have accepted that is gone too. So what are you saying? You want a divorce? The word hung between us like a bomb, and I realized that until he said it, I hadn't let myself think it. Divorce. At 67. After 38 years of marriage. The idea was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I don't know what I want yet, but I know what I don't want anymore. That night, Richard slept in the guest bedroom, and I called Elena. "I told you I was thinking about you," she said when she heard my voice. "How are things going with the family drama?" I told her about David's visit, about the conversation with Richard, about feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff not knowing whether to jump or retreat. "Can I give you some advice?" she said. "Stop trying to figure out the rest of your life. Just figure out tomorrow. Then the day after that. Then the day after that. Eventually, you'll look up and realize you've been living the life you actually want instead of the life you settled for." I'm scared. Elena. Good. Being scared means you're paying attention. Being scared means it matters. The next morning, I called the bank and transferred my remaining savings into a separate account that only I could access. $10,437. Not enough to live on indefinitely, but enough to give me options. Then I called my supervisor at Murphy's Diner and gave my 2 weeks' notice. "Are you sure about this, Margaret? You've been here 15 years. "I'm sure. It's time." "Do you have another job lined up?" "I'm working on it." That afternoon, I researched flights to Alaska. Northern Lights tours, small hotels, rental cars. The prices were more than I had expected, but not impossible. Not if seeing them was the most important thing in my life. I was printing out travel information when Richard came home from work. He saw the papers on the kitchen table and picked them up without asking. "Alaska? Margaret, what is this?" "It's a trip I'm planning to take." "A trip? We can't afford a trip. And Alaska? In January? Are you insane?" "I can afford it. And yes, Alaska in January. That's when the Northern Lights are most visible." "The Northern Lights? Jesus Christ, Margaret, you're acting like a teenager. We're too old for this kind of nonsense." "You're too old. I'm exactly the right age." "I forbid it." The words came out of his mouth automatically, like a reflex he couldn't control. And maybe that's what they were. Maybe after 38 years of me asking permission for everything, he couldn't conceive of me making a decision without his approval. "You forbid it?" I repeated the words slowly, tasting their absurdity. "Richard, you don't get to forbid me to do anything. You're not my father. You're not even acting like my husband. I am your husband, and husbands and wives make decisions together, like you made the decision about my car together with me." His face reddened. That was different. How was it different? Because giving the car to Mom made sense. Going to Alaska to look at lights in the sky is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to you. To me, it's necessary. Necessary for what? For remembering who I am. You're my wife. You're Sarah and Michael's mother. You're Ma's daughter-in-law. You know exactly who you are. Those are relationships, Richard. Those are roles I play. I'm talking about who I am inside those roles, who I was before those roles, and who I want to be in addition to them. I don't understand what you're talking about. And that was the problem. After 38 years together, he didn't understand me at all. He had never tried to understand me. He had simply assigned me a set of functions and expected me to fulfill them without complaint or evolution. I know you don't understand. That's the problem. That week, I made more changes. I opened my own checking account at a different bank. I researched apartments in neighborhoods I had always wanted to live in but never thought I could afford. I called a lawyer who specialized in family law and set up a consultation. I also called Sarah and Michael and asked them to meet me for dinner. We hadn't all been together in months, not since the crisis of my strange behavior began. We met at a small Italian restaurant in Forest Hills, the kind of family place where the waiters remember your order and the owner's children do homework at corner tables. Sarah arrived first, looking harried and checking her phone constantly. Michael came in 10 minutes later, apologizing for traffic. Looking at them across the table, I tried to see past my own hurt to the people they actually were. Sarah had Richard's stubborn chin and my mother's anxious eyes. She worked too hard, worried too much, and had never learned to ask for help without feeling guilty about it. Michael had my father's gentle hands and Richard's defensive posture. He was trying to build a life that looked successful from the outside while struggling with insecurities he couldn't name. They were good people, I realized. Flawed and selfish in the way that everyone is, but not evil. Not deliberately cruel. They had simply learned to see me as a resource rather than a person, and I had taught them that dynamic by accepting it for so long. "Mom, what's going on?" Sarah asked after we had ordered. "Dad says you're talking about taking some crazy trip to Alaska." "I am taking a trip to Alaska." "Why?" Michael asked, genuinely confused. "What's in Alaska?" "The Northern Lights." They exchanged a look, the kind of look that said their mother had finally gone completely insane. "Mom," Sarah said carefully, "are you having some kind of midlife crisis?" "I'm 67 years old, Sarah. If this is a midlife crisis, I plan to live to be 134. Michael laughed despite himself. "Okay, but seriously, Alaska? In winter? Alone?" "Yes, alone. I've been alone for most of my life anyway. I might as well be alone somewhere beautiful." "You're not alone," Sarah protested. "You have Dad, you have us, you have the grandkids." "Do I? When's the last time any of you called just to talk to me? Not to ask for money or babysitting or help with something, just to see how I was doing?" They were quiet, searching their memories for evidence to contradict me and coming up short. "It's not that we don't care," Michael said finally. "It's just that everyone's so busy." "I know you're busy. I've been busy too. But somehow I've always found time for your emergencies, your needs, your problems. I've always found time to be your mother. When do I get time to be myself?" "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean, when do I get to want things? When do I get to make plans? When do I get to matter as much as everyone else?" "You matter, Mom." Sarah's voice was small, uncertain. "Then act like it. Stop calling me only when you need money. Stop assuming I'll babysit whenever you want a break. Stop talking about me like I'm a problem to be solved instead of a person to be understood." "Is this because we didn't call on your birthday?" Michael asked. "Because I'm sorry about that. I had it in my calendar, It's not about the birthday calls, Michael. It's about everything. It's about feeling invisible in my own family." "We don't make you invisible," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Don't you? When's the last time any of you asked about my dreams, my fears, my happiness? When's the last time you treated me like someone whose opinions and feelings mattered?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Around us, other families chatted and laughed, sharing stories and making plans. I envied their easy intimacy, their obvious affection for each other. "What do you want from us?" Sarah asked finally. "I want you to see me. I want you to know that I have interests beyond solving your problems. I want you to understand that I'm a person, not just your mother." "Of course you're a person," Michael said. "Then talk to me like one. Ask me questions about things other than my availability to help with your lives. Express interest in my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences." "Okay," Sarah said slowly. "What? What kind of things are you interested in?" The question was asked awkwardly, like she was talking to a stranger, and in many ways she was. When had she last tried to get to know me as an individual? "I love poetry. I always have, but I stopped reading it because no one else in the family cared about it. I love art, and history, and traveling to places I've only seen in books. I dream about writing someday, maybe just for myself, maybe for other people. I think about what it would be like to live somewhere completely different, to reinvent myself entirely." They stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "I had no idea," Sarah whispered. "How could you? You never asked." "But you never said anything either," Michael pointed out. "You're right, I didn't. I spent so much time being who you needed me to be that I forgot I was allowed to be anyone else." The food came, and we ate in relative quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "Mom, about the money we've borrowed over the years." "You mean the money I've given you over the years?" "We always intended to pay you back. But you never did. And after a while, I stopped expecting you to. But I also stopped being able to afford it." "Are you saying you can't help us anymore?" Michael asked, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "I'm saying I won't help you anymore. Not the way I have been. If you have a genuine emergency, we can talk about it. But I'm not going to be your backup plan for every financial inconvenience." "But Mom, we depend on you," Sarah said. "I know, and that's been the problem. You depend on me for money, for babysitting, for emotional labor, for solving problems that you should be solving yourselves. You've never had to truly be adults because I was always there to catch you when you fell. So you're just cutting us off?" "I'm cutting off the dynamic that's made all of us unhappy. You resent having to ask me for help, and I resent being asked. You feel guilty about needing money, and I feel invisible except when I'm needed. None of us are getting what we want from this relationship." "What do you want?" Michael asked. "I want you to call because you miss me, not because you need me. I want relationships with you that aren't based on transactions. I want you to be interested in my life the way I've been interested in yours. And if we can't do that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah was looking at me with something that might have been fear, and Michael was fidgeting with his napkin like a nervous child. "Then we'll all have to decide what kind of relationship we can have." We parted that night with awkward hugs and promises to think about things and talk soon. I watched them drive away in their expensive cars, heading back to their suburban houses and their complicated lives, and I felt sad but not regretful. David called that night to check in. "How did it go?" "Hard, but necessary." "Are you okay?" "I'm scared, but I'm also proud of myself." I told them the truth about how I've been feeling, even though it was uncomfortable. "That's huge, Margaret. How do you feel now?" "Like I've been holding my breath for 30 years and I'm finally exhaling." "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice careful. "I told Linda I want a divorce." "How did she take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. There's going to be lawyers and custody discussions about the girls and all the messy details of unraveling a 25-year marriage. But Margaret, for the first time in a decade, I feel like myself again." "What does this mean for us?" "I don't know, but I want to find out. I want to see where this goes when we're both free to choose it." After we hung up, I sat by my window, looking out at the city lights, and trying to imagine a future I had never allowed myself to dream about. A future where I mattered to myself as much as I mattered to everyone else. A future where love was a choice rather than an obligation. The next day, I booked my flight to Alaska. The ticket was expensive, more than I had spent on myself in 5 years combined. But as I entered my credit card information, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Excitement. Richard found the confirmation email when he was using my computer to check sports scores. "You actually did it," he said, standing in the doorway of the kitchen with the printed page in his hand. "You actually bought a ticket to Alaska." "Yes, without discussing it with me. Just like you gave my car to your mother without discussing it with me. That's different, and you know it." "How is it different, Richard? How is you making unilateral decisions about our shared resources different from me making unilateral decisions about my own money?" "Because what I did made sense. What you're doing is crazy. It's only crazy to you because you don't understand why it matters to me. But you've never tried to understand why anything matters to me." He sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly looking older than his 69 years. Maggie, I don't know what I did wrong. I've been a good husband. I've worked hard. I've provided for you. I've been faithful. What more do you want? I want you to know me. I want you to care about what I think, what I feel, what I dream about. I want you to see me as more than someone who cooks your dinner and washes your clothes. I do see you as more than that. Do you? What's my favorite color? He opened his mouth, then closed it. What's my favorite book? Silence. What do I want most in life? Maggie, those aren't the important things. They're important to me. Richard, we've been married for 38 years, and you don't know anything about who I am inside this marriage. I know you're a good wife. I know you're a good mother. I know you're a hard worker. Those are things I do, not who I am. I don't understand the difference. And there it was. After nearly 4 decades together, he truly didn't understand the difference between my actions and my identity, between my functions and my essence. I know you don't understand, and I don't think you want to understand. I think you like me better as a collection of services than as a whole person. That's not fair. Neither is giving away my car. Neither is forgetting my birthday. Neither is dismissing my feelings every time I try to express them. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the confirmation email like it contained the answer to a puzzle he couldn't solve. When do you leave? He asked finally. Next week. How long will you be gone? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I mean, I bought a one-way ticket. I'll come back when I'm ready to come back. A one-way ticket? His voice rose in panic. Maggie, you can't just disappear to Alaska indefinitely. What about your job? What about me? What about the family? I quit my job. As for you and the family, you'll figure it out the same way you figured everything out before I existed. I can't lose you, Maggie. The words came out broken, desperate. And for a moment, I saw past his anger and confusion to the fear underneath. He was scared. Maybe for the first time in our marriage, Richard was truly scared of losing me. You lost me a long time ago, Richard. You lost me when you stopped seeing me as someone worth knowing. You lost me when you gave away my car. You lost me when my birthday became unimportant and my dreams became irrelevant, and my feelings became inconveniences. I can change. Can you? Because change doesn't happen overnight, and I don't have any more years to spend waiting for you to decide I'm worth the effort. Please don't go to Alaska. Why? Because I love you. I looked at him sitting at our kitchen table. This man I had spent most of my adult life with, and I felt sad rather than angry. He believed he loved me. He probably did love the version of me that asked for nothing and gave everything. But he had never loved the whole person I was, because he had never bothered to meet her. I love you too, Richard, but I love me more now. And I won't give up the chance to see the Northern Lights because you suddenly realize you don't want to lose me. That week passed in a blur of preparations and arguments. Richard tried everything: anger, guilt, promises, threats, to convince me not to go. Sarah and Michael called repeatedly, alternating between concern for my mental health and panic about their own financial situations. But I had made my decision, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to let other people's fears and needs override my own. The night before my flight, I packed a single suitcase with warm clothes and the books I had always wanted to read. I looked around our apartment one more time, trying to feel some sense of loss or regret. But all I felt was relief. Richard was sitting on the couch when I came out of the bedroom with my suitcase. "This is really happening," he said. "Yes. I don't know how to do this without you. You'll learn. You're a smart man, Richard. You'll figure out how to take care of yourself. What if I can't? Then you'll ask for help from someone who isn't me." He was crying now. something I had seen maybe 3 times in our entire marriage. I'm sorry about the car. I'm sorry I forgot your birthday. I'm sorry I didn't know your favorite color. Blue, I said quietly. What? My favorite color. It's blue. Like the ocean on postcards of places I always wanted to visit. I'll remember that. I hope so. But don't remember it for me, Richard. Remember it for the next woman who makes the mistake of thinking you'll eventually notice who she is. I left early the next morning, before Richard woke up. I couldn't handle another scene, another round of promises and pleas and emotional manipulation. I wrote him a letter explaining my decision one more time, left it on the kitchen table, and caught a cab to JFK. On the plane, as New York disappeared beneath the clouds, I opened one of my books and began to read. For the first time in decades, I had nowhere to be but exactly where I was. No one to take care of but myself. No one's needs to consider but my own. It was terrifying. It was also the most beautiful feeling I had ever experienced. I spent 3 weeks in Alaska, staying in a small bed and breakfast outside Fairbanks, run by a woman named Joan who had moved there from Chicago after her own divorce. She understood why I had come and never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. The Northern Lights were everything I had dreamed they would be and more. The first time I saw them, dancing across the star-filled sky in ribbons of green and blue, I cried until I couldn't breathe. They were beautiful, yes, but more than that, they were proof that there was still magic in the world for people brave enough to chase it. During the days, I explored the wilderness, took photography classes, and wrote in a journal for the first time since college. I wrote about my marriage, my children, my regrets, and my hopes. I wrote about feeling invisible and finding my voice. I wrote about David and the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. I also talked to Joan, whose story was both different from and eerily similar to mine. She had spent 23 years married to a man who saw her as a housekeeper and babysitter rather than a partner. The difference was that she had recognized the dynamic earlier and done something about it. The hardest part, she told me over coffee one morning, wasn't leaving him. It was forgiving myself for waiting so long to leave. Do you regret it? Some days, when I'm paying all the bills myself, when I'm sick and have no one to bring me soup, when I see couples who actually seem happy together. But then I wake up in the morning and remember that I can spend my day however I want, and the regret disappears. Are you lonely? Sometimes, but I was lonelier in my marriage than I've ever been alone. I understood exactly what she meant. After 3 weeks, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I booked a return flight to New York, but I also kept Joan's phone number and her offer to help if I ever decided to make Alaska my permanent home. The flight back felt different from the flight out. I was returning to the same city, the same apartment, the same family, but I was not the same person. I had seen the Northern Lights. I had spent 3 weeks accountable to no one but myself. I had remembered what it felt like to matter. Richard was waiting for me at the airport, holding flowers and looking nervous. He had lost weight, and there were new lines around his eyes that made him look vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Welcome home," he said, and handed me the bouquet. Blue flowers. He had remembered. Thank you. We drove home in relative silence, both of us uncertain about how to navigate this new dynamic. The apartment looked the same, but it felt different, smaller somehow, like I had outgrown it during my time away. "I've been thinking while you were gone," Richard said as we sat in the living room, "about what you said, about not knowing you, about not seeing you. And I want to try. I want to learn who you are. Why now? Because I almost lost you. Because I realize I don't want to spend the rest of my life with a stranger, and that's what we've become to each other." It was a start, not much of one, but more than I had expected. "It's going to take time," I warned him, "and effort, real effort, not just good intentions. I know. And I'm not going back to being the person I was before I left. That woman is gone. I don't want her back, he said, surprising me. I want to know the woman who came back from Alaska. I want to know the woman who saw the northern lights. Over the next few months, we began the slow work of rebuilding our relationship from the ground up. Richard started asking me questions about my day, my thoughts, my feelings. He remembered my birthday and my favorite coffee, and the books I was reading. He stopped assuming I would automatically say yes to his mother's requests and started checking with me first. It wasn't easy. 38 years of bad habits don't disappear overnight. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when we both wondered if we were too old and too set in our ways to learn how to love each other properly, but there were also breakthroughs, conversations that lasted past bedtime, shared laughter over inside jokes we were building together, small gestures of consideration that felt revolutionary after decades of neglect. Sarah and Michael struggled more with my transformation. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't babysit every weekend anymore, why I said no to non-emergency requests for money, why I expected them to show interest in my life rather than just seeking solutions to their problems. "You're different," Sarah complained during one of our phone calls. "You're not like you used to be." "No, I'm not. I'm better." "Better how?" "I'm happier. I know who I am. I matter to myself now. But you're less available." "Yes, I am. And you're more capable of handling your own life than you realized." It took almost a year, but gradually Sarah and Michael began to adapt to the new version of me. They started calling occasionally just to talk. They asked about my photography hobby and my book club and my plans for future travel. They stopped treating me like a service provider and started treating me like a person they were related to. David and I continued our correspondence, but it evolved into something different than it had been during those desperate early months. He was working through his own divorce, rediscovering who he was outside his marriage, learning to be alone in a way that felt empowering rather than lonely. "I think we both needed to save ourselves before we could save each other," he said during one of our calls. "Are we saving each other?" "We're reminding each other that we're worth saving." A year and a half after my trip to Alaska, David flew to New York again. But this time, I met him as a woman who knew her own worth rather than one desperate to be valued by someone else. We spent a long weekend together, walking through the city, talking about our lives, marveling at how much had changed since our first reunion. He was divorced now, living alone in a small house near the university, dating occasionally but not seriously. "I keep comparing everyone to you," he admitted as we sat in Central Park watching the sunset. "Not to the you I remember from college, but to the you I've gotten to know over these past 2 years. That's not fair to them." "I know, but I can't help it. You've become the standard by which I measure connection, authenticity, courage." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm still in love with you. But more than that, I'm saying I admire who you've become, the woman who went to Alaska alone, the woman who rebuilt her marriage on her own terms, the woman who refused to disappear." "I'm still married, David. I know. And I'm not asking you to change that. I'm just telling you that loving you, even from a distance, has made me a better person." We kissed that night, standing on the Brooklyn Bridge where we had stood 2 years earlier when I was first learning to see myself as someone worth loving. But this kiss was different, less desperate, more certain. The kiss of two people who had found their own worth and were choosing to share it with each other. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we keep being friends. We keep supporting each other's growth. We keep proving that love doesn't always have to mean possession." "Can you live with that?" "I can live with that. The question is, can you?" I thought about Richard, who had spent the past year and a half learning to see me as a whole person. I thought about the fragile new intimacy we had built, the respect he was finally showing me, the partnership we were slowly creating. I thought about David, who loved me completely but understood that life is complicated and love doesn't always get to be the only consideration. I thought about myself, finally free to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what everyone else needed from me. Yes, I said. I can live with that. David flew back to Seattle the next day, and I returned to my life in New York. But I was carrying something different now. The knowledge that I was loved by someone who saw all of me, even if circumstances meant we couldn't be together in the traditional sense. Richard noticed the change immediately. "You seem happy," he said. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am happy." "Because of your friend?" I had told Richard about David during one of our new, more honest conversations. Not everything, but enough. That we had been close in college, that we had reconnected, that our correspondence had helped me remember my own worth. Partly because of my friend, but mostly because of me. "I'm glad," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "I want you to be happy, Maggie. I know I spent a lot of years not caring about your happiness, but I care now." "I know you do. Do you think we can make this work? This marriage, I mean? The new version of it?" I looked at my husband, really looked at him. He was trying so hard to understand me, to value me, to be worthy of the woman I had become. It wasn't perfect, and it might never be the grand love story I had dreamed of as a young woman. But it was real, and it was honest, and it was based on mutual respect. "I think we already are making it work," I said. 2 years after my trip to Alaska, I took another trip. This time to Ireland, the country my grandmother had told me stories about, but never lived to see again. Richard came with me, his first international trip in 30 years. We walked through the countryside where my great-grandmother had grown up, visited castles and pubs and villages with names I had been practicing in my head since childhood. Richard asked questions about my family history, took pictures of me in places I had always dreamed of seeing, listened to me tell stories about the ancestors who had shaped my imagination. "I never knew you cared about all this," he said as we stood on the cliffs of Moher, looking out at the Atlantic Ocean. "I never told you because I didn't think you'd be interested." I wasn't interested in a lot of things I should have been interested in. I'm trying to do better. "I know you are." On our last night in Dublin, as we shared a bottle of wine in the hotel bar, he asked me a question that surprised us both. "Do you still love him? Your friend from college?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I do." "Are you going to leave me for him?" "No. Why not?" I thought about how to explain something I was still figuring out myself. Because love isn't always about having everything you want. Sometimes love is about appreciating what you have while acknowledging what you've lost. David and I love each other, but we also love the lives we've built with other people. We've chosen to be happy for each other, rather than devastated by circumstances we can't change. "And us? Do you love me?" "I love who you've become over the past 2 years. I love the effort you've made to know me. I love the partnership we're building together. That's not the same as being in love. No, it's not. But it's something else that's valuable. It's respect and affection and shared history and the satisfaction of having worked hard to save something worth saving." He nodded slowly. "I can live with that." "Good, because that's what we have." Now, 3 years after my trip to Alaska, I wake up every morning knowing exactly who I am. I am Margaret, a woman who loves poetry and photography and traveling to places she's only read about. I am someone's wife, but I am not only someone's wife. I am someone's mother, but I am not only someone's mother. I am a person with interests and dreams and opinions that matter. Richard and I have settled into a life that works for both of us. We're not passionately in love, but we're genuinely fond of each other. We share household responsibilities, make decisions together, and respect each other's need for independence. He has his poker games and fishing trips. I have my book club and photography classes and correspondence with David. Sarah and Michael have grown into the kind of adult children I always hoped they would become. They call regularly, not because they need something, but because they want to stay connected. They ask for my advice and actually listen to my responses. They've learned to solve their own problems and manage their own finances, and our relationships are stronger because of it. David and I still write to each other regularly. He's dating someone now, a colleague from his university who shares his love of literature and hiking. She sounds lovely, and I'm genuinely happy for him. Our love has evolved into something that transcends traditional categories, deeper than friendship, but not threatening to our other relationships. I still think about that moment when I watched Dolores drive away in my car, feeling invisible and powerless and forgotten. If I could go back and tell that woman anything, it would be this: you are not invisible. You are not powerless. You are not forgotten by the people who matter most, and the most important person who matters is you. The car was never really about the car. It was about being seen, being valued, being consulted about decisions that affected my life. It was about mattering to the people I had spent decades serving. I never got that car back. Dolores still drives it, though she's 92 now and probably shouldn't be driving at all. But I don't need that car anymore. I have something better: the knowledge that I am worth more than any sacrifice I could make for someone else's convenience. Last month, I went car shopping, not because I needed transportation, but because I wanted transportation. I bought a small blue SUV with good gas mileage and space for luggage. Richard came with me, but he let me make the decision. When I signed the papers, he squeezed my hand and said, "I'm proud of you, Maggie." Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. This weekend I'm planning another trip. Nothing as dramatic as Alaska this time, just a long weekend in Vermont to see the fall foliage and visit some art galleries. Richard might come with me, or he might not. Either way is fine with me. Because I've learned the most important lesson of my life. I don't need anyone else's permission to exist. I don't need anyone else's approval to pursue my dreams. I don't need anyone else to validate my worth. I am enough, exactly as I am, exactly where I am. And if you're listening to this because you recognize something of yourself in my story, I want you to know, you are enough too. You are worth more than your sacrifices. You deserve to be seen and valued and consulted about the decisions that affect your life. It's never too late to remember who you are outside of who everyone else needs you to be. It's never too late to matter to yourself. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Have you ever watched someone else receive credit for your sacrifices, or drive away with something that belonged to you while you stood there saying nothing? Share your story in the comments below. Let's remind each other that we're not alone in this struggle to be seen, to be valued, to be whole. And if this video helped you remember your own worth, please like it and subscribe. Sometimes the most radical thing we can do is tell our truth and hope it helps someone else find theirs. Thank you for listening to mine.